Today, I'm comparing the Razer Viper V2 Pro to the Razer Viper Ultimate. My production value for this is going to be really cheap because I'm lazy. So without further ado, let's get nerdy. One thing to note before we start this video, I want you to keep your own track of what you find important over what I find important. I'm going to try to be as objective as I can on which one is better compared to the other one, but that is going to be part of my own personal preference, and you may not agree with that, and that's perfectly fine. So keep your own tally when we're going through this on which one is better, because at the end, then you can tally them together and see which one is the better mouse for you. Starting off with the sensor, the Razer Viper V2 Pro comes with the Razer Focus Pro, where the Razer Viper Ultimate comes with the Razer Focus Plus. So the Focus Pro has 30,000 DPI compared to 20,000 DPI. It has 750 IPS compared to 650 IPS. It has 70G acceleration compared to 60G acceleration. It has 99.8% resolution accuracy compared to 99.6 resolution accuracy, which surprisingly does make a difference. I can tell a difference between this sensor in-game compared to this sensor in-game, which blows my mind. I was really not expecting that. And then I can tell a difference between the Focus Plus sensor compared to any other sensor. So it's one of those that the accuracy for both of these is going to be really great, but it's going to be even better for the Focus Pro and is a main reason why this guy is so expensive. Moving on to the other parts of the sensor, asymmetric cutoff, which means that the liftoff and landing adjustment for both of these mice are present because they both have it. However, for the Razer Viper V2 Pro, if you go under calibration, you have a lot more adjustments that you can do inside the software to fine-tune your liftoff and landing distance, where with the Razer Viper Ultimate, when you look at that, you only have 3 things to adjust. So it is a little more accurate on the Viper V2 Pro. Additionally, you have smart tracking, which means for the Viper V2 Pro that you can actually use this on glass and any surface, and it's going to keep a consistent liftoff distance on every single thing that you use it on. The Razer Viper Ultimate also has this, however, it's just not as accurate. Last, you have something called motion sync, which means that it actually syncs the signals that your mouse is sending out and the signals that your computer is reading so that they're perfectly synced up, so you have the most up-to-date mouse position, and it does make a difference. All of this leads to both of these sensors just being like unbelievably accurate in game. It's unreal. Moving on to the next point, which is going to be weight. The Razer Viper V2 Pro weighs 58 or 59 grams. 58 is going to be for the black version. 59 is going to be for the white version because the paint coating adds a gram. So as you can see on the scale, it is 59 grams. When it comes to the Razer Viper Ultimate, it weighs 74 to 78 grams. So it's going to weigh 74 grams for the black version, and it's going to be 78 grams for the colored variants. As you can see on my scale, that weighs 78 grams. So the weight difference here is huge, which is another reason why this guy costs so much. Moving on to the switches, the Razer Viper V2 Pro comes with Razer's Gen 3 optical switches, where the Razer Viper Ultimate comes with their Gen 2 optical switches. The Gen 2 optical switches and the Gen 3 optical switches are going to feel very similar because the main difference that you have here is that you have increased tolerances for the Gen 3 compared to the Gen 2. So it just makes it more likely that you're going to get a premium switch. However, the switch feel, so the crispness and everything like that is going to be, should theoretically be the same between all of them. Just with tighter tolerances. Hopefully I explained that well. I don't know if I actually did. Starting off with the Razer V2 Pro, its clicks have mild pre-travel on both of them, and they are consistent. The left and right is very consistent. And then I would say that I would almost say that that's mild post-travel as well. Where with the Razer Viper Ultimate, I've got the same exact thing where I've got mild pre-travel on both. Both clicks are consistent on both of them, and I would say mild post-travel on both. Moving on to button wobble, I notice a little, I mean, this is me being really hardcore with it, and there's very little on the Viper Ultimate. And when I go to the Viper V2 Pro, I would say I have even less wobble on the V2 Pro. When it comes to how both of these clicks feel in comparison to each other, it's a really hard call, as both of them feel really crisp, as I got really lucky on both of these that have extremely crisp clicks, very comparable to the Pro X. I would actually say that the clicks on both of these are actually superior to my Pro X version. However, the click on my Viper V2 Pro is going to be a little more crisp than on the Viper Ultimate, but that could be due to variance. It could also be due to me using this mouse a little bit more. They've worn down a little bit more, and it could due to the Gen 3 switches of just having better tolerances. However, both of them feel very much the same. They sound pretty much the same. So when it comes to clicks, I give a little bit of an edge just because of my copy on these two. However, I would consider that to be a complete wash. Moving on to the side buttons on the Razer Viper V2 Pro, I think feel better as they are a little more crisp and they stick out from the shell a lot more, where with the Viper V2 Pro, it was one of those that it doesn't stick out quite as much, so it's pretty flush with the side and then felt a little more mushy, where these feel really crisp, and I would say they have mild pre-travel and the back one has moderate post-travel, but they're pretty similar on both of them. And then when I go to the Viper V2 Pro, I apologize for my camera. It's a piece of junk and never likes to actually like focus no matter what I do. So you're just going to have to deal with it. I apologize. Is going to be moderate moderate pre-travel with mild post-travel. That was hard. Did I say that correctly? Moderate pre-travel, mild post-travel is correct, where the Razer Viper V2 Pro is going to have mild pre and post-travel. Moving on to the scroll wheel, I can't give one or the other a winner. I think they're the same exact thing, and I think the feelings that I'm feeling between them both are just simply due to variance. I do feel like this one feels a little bit better on the V2 Pro as it's a little more stiffer. I have a little more defined clicks, and it also sticks up from the body a little bit more from the Viper Ultimate as well. I don't know if that really matters all that much. So it's one of those that, like, according to my two models here, the scroll wheel is better. I swear to God that that's just due to variance. I think it's the same exact, so I'm going to call that a wash. Moving on to the wireless, they both are using Razer's Hyperspeed wireless. However, the Viper V2 Pro does have a hidden thing that most people are unaware of, has an improved wireless dongle where it is able to have two simultaneous 1000 hertz wireless things at the same time. So if you're not using a second device, then that means that the connection for this guy is going to be a little bit stronger than the connection to this guy. And then additionally, if you say you have the Razer Viper V2 Pro mouse, and then you also have a wireless keyboard or headset that also uses their Razer Hyperspeed wireless, you can actually use a single wireless puck instead of two wireless pucks. So for the Viper V2 Pro, you could have your headset and your mouse plugged into just this guy right here, where with the Razer Viper Ultimate, that isn't an option and you would have to use both pucks. So the way that I would do that is I would go into the Razer Viper V2 Pro, I would open the pairing utility, and then I can view compatible devices. So if I bring up that web page, so that works for the Black Widow V3 Pro and all these other things. So I'll let you look at that because I don't need to read them off to you. And then you would click add, and then it would actually add it. So if I turn on my Viper Ultimate and then I look at the same thing for my Viper Ultimate, that's not present because, like I said, the Viper Ultimate hasn't been upgraded with that upgraded wireless. So the win again would go to the Viper V2 Pro in that instance because it is slightly better. Moving on to the polling rate, both of them use 1000 hertz, so that's not a big deal. So moving on to the battery for the Razer Viper V2 Pro is 80 hours compared to 70 hours with the Razer Viper Ultimate. One thing to note though is that the Razer Viper Ultimate does have RGB. Viper V2 Pro does not have RGB lighting. However, it does have a little light right here that when you're pressing through the DPI buttons, that it will go change colors based on the DPI that you're on. And then of course, when you hold to turn off the device, that light will blink. And then when you hold it on, it will turn on again. And that the color will be on whatever DPI setting you have. So if it's the red DPI setting, then it's going to be red. If it's blue, then it's going to be blue when it turns on and off, and so on and so forth. With the Razer Viper Ultimate, of course, you have the actual RGB, and then on the bottom, you have the DPI profiler as well, which changes colors based off of whichever one you're doing it. And then if you go into the software itself, you are able to adjust that brightness from 0 to 100, and that will save onto the onboard profile for the Razer Viper Ultimate. And you can also switch off lighting after X amount of time. However, if you want to change the actual color of the light, then you have to have Razer Synapse open, and then you have to change it through their Chroma Studio. It does the specific colors do not save to Razer mice, which I think is really stupid. I don't understand how Razer still does not allow you to save onboard color profiles to your mouse, but it is what it is. Going back to the actual battery life, I promise all of this is related. If you have RGB on, it's going to be considerably less than the 70 hours. You also have to keep in mind that this uses optical switches, which means a light is always on when this is running, which is also going to cause the battery to not be as long. And then you also have this light, which is depending on how much you're lifting it, because every time the sensor picks up that it's being off, it turns on that light, which is also going to reduce battery life. With the Viper V2 Pro, it doesn't have any LEDs that are on at all, so it's one of those that the battery life, no matter what, is going to be a lot longer on the V2 Pro simply due to not having RGB lighting. Additionally, I think they might have made some changes. I don't know if this is true or not, but in order to wake up the Viper V2 Pro, you actually have to move it for the sensor to register movement. You can't just click it, where I want to say for the Viper Ultimate that you can click it. I don't know for sure. I'm too lazy to test it out, so I could be wrong about that, but that's also something that's going to allow you to have longer battery life, as again, optical switches means that there's going to be a light on all the time, and if this thing goes to sleep and those lights are on to register that you clicked, that means it's going to lower overall battery life, where with the Viper V2 Ultimate, V2 Pro, it's going to, since that is actually going to turn off, it's going to give you better battery life even when it's resting. So technically the win is going to go to the Viper V2 Pro. They both come with a 2-year warranty. The Razer Viper V2 Pro, with them getting rid of the right side buttons, makes this actually a right-handed symmetrical mouse, where the Viper Ultimate with the 2 side buttons makes it an ambidextrous symmetrical shape instead. Moving on to the buttons, the Razer Viper Ultimate has 5 buttons, so you have your right click, left click, scroll up, scroll down, and your middle click, and then you have your left and right click, where with the Razer Viper Ultimate, you have 8 buttons, which include left click, scroll up, scroll down, the right side front button and back button, and then the 2 buttons on the left side. And then, of course, you can also cycle the sensitivity stages on the bottom of the mouse, which you can't do with the Razer Viper V2 Pro. So to actually show that on the mouse itself, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. They both come with the SpeedFlex cable. However, it has been improved on the Viper V2 Pro, as it is now using USB-C over micro USB. So it's one of those that I actually prefer the USB-C, and I prefer that cord as it's a little more flexible. I would show you that cord, but it's all hooked up on my PC and I'm not taking that apart, so you can have a peek at it for 5 seconds in this video, because we're also moving on. The one thing that is a big difference between these two mice in that category is that the Viper Ultimate comes with an actual dock. If you get the one for $150, the $131 one doesn't. More on that in a little bit, but it comes with a dock, and because it has pogo chargers on the bottom, you actually put that on the dock and then it can charge wirelessly. So it is a truly wireless mouse. That is really nice. You just pop that on at the end of the night and it'll charge up. It also holds your dongle, and then on the back here is where you plug in the SpeedFlex cable. So the Razer Viper Ultimate in that sense is a lot nicer. With the Viper V2 Pro, they actually got rid of that pogo thing. So that trade is going to be highly dependent on individuals, whether that is worth it or not. I love the dock for a long time. I'll take the trade for weight for an USB-C personally for the Viper V2 Pro. However, I have to give the winner to the Viper Ultimate for that one, because the dock is just so freaking nice. Moving on to the PTFE feet. The PTFE feet for both of them are going to be 100% PTFE. This one is a little more rounded, and then you have 2 on the front and then 1 on the bottom and then 1 around the sensor. For this guy, you've got 4 separate ones, and they're just a lot smaller, so you've got a little more surface area. And then, of course, a change of color. And one thing to note, though, that a lot of people did complain about is that you can kind of see here that's a little bit indented. So when people were pressing really hard, they could actually feel that on their mouse, that going, like their pad going into that and adding a little extra resistance there. I never had an issue with that, but it is something that I heard multiple times. That is obviously fixed with this being flat here, so that is no longer the case. I would say when it comes to just overall glide, I don't think that there's really that big of a difference between the PTFE. The biggest thing that you're seeing is going to be that this is way more lightweight than this guy. I would also say that due to the weight, the Razer Viper V2 Pro is also way better balanced. So it's one of those that I would take that, where this is very front and back heavy, but in the center is pretty balanced, where it's better done on the Viper V2 Pro is extremely well balanced, which makes a huge difference. So again, I would give the win to the Viper V2 Pro in this category, just because the weight is dramatically better with the 58, 59 grams compared to 74 to 79. 78, and then also just the balance is superior on the V2 Pro over the Ultimate. Moving on to the colors, the Viper V2 Pro comes in either black or white, where the Viper Ultimate comes in 4 colors, which is going to be black, pink, white, or the Cyberpunk. So obviously the win goes to the Viper Ultimate for that one. Moving on to the price, so this is a hot topic for a lot of people. The Razer Viper V2 Pro comes at $149.99 for just the mouse, where the Razer Viper Ultimate comes for $150 if you also get the dock, where it is $130 or $129 for just the mouse itself. However, what people don't necessarily understand for this is that the Viper V2 Pro has technically been built from the ground up. Everything about this mouse, except for the shape, is completely brand new. And as we've mentioned, it is a superior mouse in a lot of different ways. The Razer Viper Ultimate is an older mouse. I want to say it's 2 years old, so the cost to make this is a lot less money than the cost is to make this. Additionally, COVID has dramatically changed prices, so this normally would release for $120 or $130 pre-COVID, but due to COVID, everything is more expensive, as we know in our lives. Gas, groceries, literally everything across the board is more expensive. That also hits companies. So the Razer Viper Ultimate should have been $120 to $130. That's what they were going to release it at, but due to the increased cost of everything, it is currently $150, where the Razer Viper Ultimate goes on sale a lot more often because it's an older mouse. We will be seeing this guy go on sale a lot in the future, so the 150 mark isn't solid. I also don't think it's fair to compare something that goes on sale all the time to something that doesn't go on sale, especially since this is 2 years old. This is less than a month old. So it's one of those that I can only look at retail pricing. For the retail pricing, obviously the win still goes to the Viper Ultimate because you also get a dock included with it for the 150. However, I think the improvements that you get with the Viper V2 Pro, for me personally, I would choose this 9 out of 10 times over me choosing this. I love both of these mice, but if you're more of a casual individual, this guy right here is going to give you way more bang for your buck. So I think the Viper V2 Pro really is only for those people who are looking to really get the very most out of their performance and are more competitive minded, or really like lighter mice or premium, like even the best of the best. Both of these guys also have green compliant packaging, which is very nice for the environment. The Viper Ultimate is reflex capable, so it's one of those, if you have a reflex monitor, you can actually hook this up and you can see it, where the Viper V2 Pro, at least as of this writing, is not. One other thing that I want to talk about just really quick is the on-off button. Obviously for the Viper Ultimate, you just slide it and it turns on, and then you slide it and it turns off. With the Viper V2 Pro, instead you hold this button and then you wait for the lights to turn on the top, and it turns on, and then to turn it off, you hold that same button and then it'll turn off. It's one of those that I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about that, but I actually kind of like the difference of the hold to turn on thing. Makes it feel a little more premium to me, but I also still worry about if my mouse were to malfunction or something. I would never know, like, is it just not turning, like, why is it not turning on? Moving on to the coating, the Viper Ultimate has a, like, legit white paint on it. It is a lot more white, where the Viper V2 Pro has white as well, but it has kind of a gray or a blue undertone to it, so it is not perfectly white, where this one is perfectly white, so there is a little bit of a difference there. When it comes to texture, the texture is a little bit different on the Viper V2 Pro. I actually prefer not having the rubber sides that are obviously present on the Viper Ultimate. I think it gives me better grip and control of my mouse, and I also just think that the coating that they use for this is a little more premium. But some people really are not a fan of the coating for the V2 Pro and prefer the one on the Viper Ultimate. I just think that this is a little more slippery for me compared to the V2 Pro. All right, so moving on to the conclusion, it's one of those that for me personally, the Viper V2 Pro is dramatically better than the Viper Ultimate, and I would definitely choose it if I was buying a new mouse. However, that is going to be highly dependent on you and your preferences, so I can't be your decision maker. You have to decide what you're looking for in a mouse and which one fits the most boxes and which one fits your price bracket the best. As the Viper Ultimate has been on sale recently for $80, and that is just, you can't beat it. This is the best mouse that you can buy on the market for $80, assuming that the shape is right for you, but spec-wise, absolutely destroys everything for $80. But it is a fantastic mouse for $80, and it'd be hard to justify $150 when you can get 90% of the way there with the Viper Ultimate. However, for me personally, that extra 10% is justified for me, makes me love this guy. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't, dislike. And of course, if you've been following my content for a while, please hit that subscribe button. Otherwise, I will see you and your beautiful face on the next one. God bless and peace out.